Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Michael McNutt, Director of Education and Events for WEDI. Happy New Year, and welcome to our Digital Front Door, a virtual spotlight presented by Axway. Real quick, just a reminder on our question and answer process. All questions are done non-verbally through our chat feature on Zoom. Follow your toolbar on Zoom, click the chat button, and feel free to ask a question at any time during the presentation. Also, a reminder that slides and the recording will be emailed to all attendees after the event. It's my pleasure now to introduce Ruby Raley, Vice President of Sales, Healthcare, and Life Sciences with Axway.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome, everyone. I know it's a busy start to January. I know you all had other things you could be doing, so we really appreciate that you took the time out to chat with us. Wesley's going to be our speaker today. Wesley Culver is one of our Axway teammates. Wesley focuses on not only sales, but also on solutioning and developing, unique and creative concepts. And Wesley brings more than 10 years of integration experience and background across many different verticals, but especially healthcare to the table. Over the last almost 9 months of 2022, Wesley focused on conversations with hospital executives in the technology space and other space, as well as a handful of payers and pharmaceutical companies. But Wesley, I mentioned that because Wesley is coming to you not just with some marketing program. He's coming to you with a validated idea and solution that has been discussed with many. And I believe that is well worth your time to hear it out and really think about how it could apply in your own business. And with that, I'll hand it over. Oh, and you can direct questions in the chat. As Michael said, I'll also be monitoring them. So if you want to direct something to me personally, you can as well. And now I'll hand it over to Wesley. Wesley, you're on mute.
Thank you for the introduction, Ruby. Michael, can you confirm that the share screen is up?
You're good to go.
All right. Well, after that introduction, this is for the digital front door, as Ruby and I will be presenting today. We'll get started real quickly here. So we'll start off with the first question, and a lot of you probably came on because it's the digital front door, and maybe you're looking for something like this, or it's something perhaps you haven't heard about, right? So it's really part of your digital business journey. So it's, in healthcare, I find that everybody's at a different place. Some verticals, I feel that technology is adopted sort of kind of in lockstep, right? Especially in oil and gas is a really good example. Healthcare is not like that. So having a conversation about your digital business journey and a digital front door and having some direction about where you're going is really cool. The point of having this digital front door is to drive innovation, accelerate the new digital services, and then also ultimately reduce costs. So how do we get there, right? Those are all three big points that everybody's really driving at. So having a conversation about where you're at is a great place to get started. So every company is on a digital business journey. So I've had conversations with, they say, Wesley, you know what? We are on a paper process. We still have charts, paper charts. We still file them. Where could we get started, right? So there's those companies, and then there's ones all the way out to this open everything ecosystem, this composable sort of platform, and they're working on that. So it's totally running the gambit on what's available. So to have a little bit of a conversation, let's kind of start off with what these mean, right? So you have a siloed business. And a lot of times today, you'd be thinking about moving workloads to the cloud. Maybe you're adopting a cloud vendor, Azure or AWS, something like that. Azure is very common because you already have your O365 subscriptions. It might also be called modernization. And the challenges to that, to moving forward, is legacy systems. You might have some on-prem components that are locked in by vendors. You might still have a mainframe in place, right? So it does tend to offer some challenges to get started, to fully wrap your mind around, okay, what can we change and where we're going. It provides you, though, a disconnected infrastructure where everything is on its own. And so we're trying to move to an integrated situation or a solution, which would be sort of the second tier here: internal integration and experimentation, right? So you want to have productivity enhancement and then reduce the tech debt, right? Reducing tech debt would be an example of adopting apps to plug a hole when we have a disconnected environment. But having done that, the tech debt is now none of these applications work together. They probably really have some challenges with messaging, right? Maybe they don't have integration with ServiceNow, so supporting them becomes very difficult, right? So this joint disconnected thing. So the roadblocks would include sort of inflexible processes. They're sort of set in place. You can't really integrate. You don't have a lot of integration points there. And then there's data silos, right? And these data silos, this is something I want to stop on, because this is where a lot of your data or a lot of your value is parked. It might be actual data silos, and it's actually technology that you've created, but it's only used for a certain part of the business. And it's something to really think about, because it's something we'll focus on later in the presentation. Now, that's more of an ad hoc project mind frame. And as you move on, you'll see a more process-oriented mind frame when you get to external integration. And you really see that because external integration changes the game, okay? For internal integration, I have to focus less on security, but you'll notice one of the roadblocks to getting to internal integration or the external integration is the threats and data privacy, right? Also the partner onboarding, right? So if I have partners now that I didn't have user accounts before, now I've got to think about using that, right? And my backend systems, how are my backend systems going to emulate my partner's experience, right? And the reason that we're doing this, the initiatives, is to offer, put in new offerings to make our services better, and also to adhere to government mandates, right? So it's not just making your business better, but it's also mandates that you have to adhere to, right? Now, one of the cool things about this is that as we go through this, you can maybe start to identify with one of these stages. And the digital front door journey and what we're presenting today can help you get from an earlier stage and faster through this to a later stage. So for example, on internal integrations, let's say you've found yourself in the second bucket here, where you're really working on getting that internal integration right. Decreasing your data silos, decreasing these inflexible processes. Well, if we design this internal solution to emulate a secure offering for an external solution, we're focusing on two stages at one time. So we're going to get you to through your digital journey much faster and become a stage 4 rather than a stage 3. So we'll move you fast through this process with some of these ideas. So over here, extend the business model. All right, I've got my internal integration systems, they're in place. I've got a way to externally integrate. The security team's bought off on it. We want to accelerate growth and drive adoption. So we need to make our apps better so that our patients use them. We need to make our apps better so that our clinicians aren't frustrated all the time. And then we need to accelerate growth. That means coming out with these digital services at a faster pace, right? So the things that get in the way with you becomes IT complexity and independent teams. We still have this problem where we have teams of people that create technology that don't work together, and they don't go to lunch, and they don't hang out after work, right? So these independent teams won't know what each other's are doing because they don't have tools to bring them together, right? And that's where we start really coming into this composable platform. And what is that, right? So we call this an ecosystem, open everything, composable platform. And this allows you to really move to the next level because we include internal integration, external integration, and extending your business models, but at a faster pace, right? So we create cross-functional digital services. And that means cross-functional, it's no longer this one-to-one idea where I do a project, I maybe do an integration to a patient portal to my EMR system, maybe my Epic system or CERN or something like that. I'm required to by the federal government. So I do a real simple integration and it is what it is. But I've got 4 or 5 other data silos in my backend that really need to be integrated into that patient portal at some point. Well, when we deliver these cross-functional digital services, this plan will get us there far sooner because of the way we'll think about that. Go into more detail. The odd thing is the roadblocks here are no longer technology. That's the cool part. Once we get here, it's culture and slow adoption. It's not technology anymore. All of these are technology. We're changing technology. By the time we get here, we have to think about doing things a little differently, right? And so we'll go into a little more detail with that. So to succeed today, right? So there's a few things we've got to capitalize on. And I put the top 3 here, and you might change their order in your own mind. But one of them is tougher regulations. So the interoperability rule, the patient access rule, that they require, and it's not this year, right? But this is a non-trivial challenge for lots of organizations, exposing PHI information to third parties via FHIR apps, right? So FHIR APIs are not secure by default, right? So the most direct way to think about doing this is, oh, well, we'll just expose these to the internet through a VPN. Well, there's some challenges with that, right? So one of them would be, I expose a FHIR API and I rely on the VPN for my security challenge. Well, the FHIR API underneath the covers is not secure by default. So if I use a VPN, I connect to that endpoint is implicitly I should trust that endpoint. Do you really? Are you going to extend to all your partners that environment? It's questionable that should be the future, right? And then the second piece to this is, how am I going to extend that to a patient portal, right? The patient portal isn't going to be managed through a VPN. So the idea here would be this big bolded piece at the bottom. Turn these digital business mandates, like the patient access rule and the interoperability rule, into an opportunity for your business. So we can start packaging up technology to meet these mandates, but benefit your business in different ways. So I'll leave it with that. The number 2, creation of open healthcare models. So what's that really mean? So create new secure services, right? And you're gathering pieces together, the data, the connections, and the integration. And so an example of that would be telehealth services, and even population health. I like telehealth because there's lots of places to go for it. A number of my customers have actually adopted a telehealth app that does this, okay? And it's got APIs associated with it. You can expand upon it. You can sort of think out of the box and make it a better experience. One of the things that a lot of times it doesn't do is scheduling, right? There's a scheduler that's separate from telehealth, right? So the telehealth part is the virtual appointment. Thirdly, start thinking about getting the person, maybe it's not a telehealth. They do a telehealth, they say, you know what, you've got to come in. We need a person-to-person interaction. This particular person needs a ride, right? So we have Uber's got an API. So could we adopt some technology from Uber and use the API to create their ride as part of the service, right? Getting them in there and doing our best. Population health initiatives are really sort of dovetail into the same idea, where you need to have real-time information to really do well, and you need information from lots of different systems. And APIs tend to be a really good way to do that, because you're going to get fresh data that's not stale, that you don't update once a quarter or once a year, and you're going to get it quickly, right? To a model that you can expand upon and really gain value out of. And then thirdly, digitization and changing patient demands. This might actually be number 1. So it depends on how you look at it. Are the patients changing your business, or is the government mandates changing your business? Probably a combination of both. So I'm going to get you coming and going with 1 and 3. The Amazon effect, right? So Amazon has created an expectation on the internet for what a digital service looks like. And you know what? The government is kind of mandating that healthcare kind of looks like an online e-shop, right? So I have an explanation of costs. I should have an expectation of those costs before I go in for a procedure, right? That's what's coming. And so we're going to require that the members and staff get a more personalized, connected experience than they have in the past. It's not going to be calling up on the phone. We need to have that connected experience where we can do this and they can basically shop around, right? In that particular example. So the Amazon effect, and government regulation coming together. And again, this really is an opportunity for the business to learn and grow and become more efficient, right? So that's really the goal of the digital front door and the experience. Now, let's go to the bad news, right? So initiatives in the industry, API initiatives, the component here, we didn't experience the business results we'd planned from our APIs. Wow, 3/4 of them agreed or strongly agreed with that. So if we're going to continue with the digital journey, we're going to consider the digital front door. We have to say, we're not going to repeat the challenges of the past, right? So what's missing? So why would we have a 3/4 agree or disagree to not getting the API value that we looked for? So there's 5 major bullet points outlined here that we'll go over. The first one is gaining business and technical alignment. It sounds really simple. The challenge, though, that I've seen is that we get technical alignment a lot of times, but the business is kind of left out. They don't. It's hard to find somebody that will really chime in and really give their opinion. Maybe perhaps we didn't really push hard enough, or in some cases they're completely left out, right? So target that use case, the revenue and the business model that's going to come out of it. We've got to do a little bit of planning of what success looks like. And then that way you can build the right digital product. That way, when the technical team comes out with it, the business doesn't go, we're not using this thing. That's terrible, right? So the second one here, generate buy-in from internal teams. That's an interesting one, right? I think this is one that a lot of organizations completely gloss over. We don't stop and say, Dr. Philip, do you agree that this would be of value if we did it with this? We did this process. We changed this on you. Would you adhere to this, right? So having them understand how the digital front door meets their needs and the incremental steps to get there, there's going to be a little bit of strife in there. So they really need to understand what the value of the outcome is and not be so myopic on what's changed right in front of them. And then include the business and technical teams, for obvious reasons. The first 2 steps here is basically 40% of the process. This is before we put any hands on the keyboard. And I call this technical buy-in and political buy-in. Those are the basic ways you can look at them as, right? So those 2 steps are a big piece of it. And a lot of times while we don't get to the end point, that 3/4 of seen as a not getting to our mandates for what the API should come out with, 40% of it is just planning, right? A good plan. Now, third here is productizing your APIs. So I'm going to put on a new word for you. Some of you might have heard productize. This is something that Gartner has also really taken off with, and something that Axway has really gone with Gartner on that message, Gartner and Forrester really. And it's about having a product focus rather than a project focus. So this is one of the things I mentioned that we would get to, and we're here, that we have to think about how we do things differently in order to move forward at a faster pace, add more services, and do it at a lower cost. So the idea of productization means you package it and it's complete. It's got ownership associated with it. It's got documentation associated with it. We do, manage the life cycle, the versioning essentially with it. And it's packaged not as an asset, something on its own, right? That a certain subset of people know about. It's packaged as a product. So it will have multiple assets to it, might have groups of assets to it, right? So you might think of it as a patient interface, and everything that the patient does to interact with your organization then uses this product to do that, right? And you have all the documentation, ownership, versioning, key assignment, everything there. So now we have a clear path to value from both teams. And why? Because the technical team and the business team can have access to this. Now the business team can then gain contextual information about what technology you already have on the shelf. That's pretty cool, right? And because the challenge with this is the second piece, simplify the onboarding experience. Let's say I can't find a technology and I'm really good, right? I can write Python all day, and my fingers might be cold, but they still move fast. You're just gonna write your own thing. That's what's gonna happen. So you're ending up with more ad hoc oriented projects that you set, forget, and then go back to them when they catch on fire. one of the things we're trying to address with this of productization is to keep that from happening. No more ad hoc, make this composable, where we do two things. We take technology that we already have, we improve it for the new use case, apply it to the old one. So both use cases get a benefit. And then now we don't have this set it and forget it, let it catch on fire mentality from the past. So this means easy to find, understandable, and to go live with. So what's that mean, right? So easy to find. That's one of the challenges, right? We have technology. Maybe it's in multiple gateways, right? Let's say you have a population health initiative. You've got a gateway in Salesforce. Then you've got an on-prem API gateway, and you've got an AWS footprint or an Azure footprint. Right there is three really brief set of organizations that maybe you have islands of technology there. So if we can bring those together, make it easy to find. I'm going to deploy an agent at these places and then get an API set of information about what assets are there, who the owners are, and I can even centrally execute everything about finding. We manage keywords along with these assets, so that even somebody that's not technically aligned with the technology, a business unit perhaps, could come in and search, right? And then also lifecycle management and versioning. I mentioned that, but it's very important. A lot of times when you have just a catalog, it gets out of hand, right? Because it's not contextual with where it's used, how it's used, and what version it's on. So you end up just picking one out of the catalog. So it's a big piece of that. And then automate the process to improve the experience. This is about creating, having the ability to create a sandbox environment. Can I just use the API and try it out? Yeah, sure. Let's automate that process so you can automate the sandbox environment in AWS or Azure or Salesforce, right? You can improve the experience also by making this a central place. I don't no longer have to go to each of these endpoints. We'll create one essentially, right? And make a reason for everybody to come together. And the last piece here is tracking value. Now, I mentioned you've got the technical alignment, you've got the political alignment. Well, when you get that, we should have some KPIs associated with these projects so that at the end, everybody can agree that there was value, that we're doing better. Keep in mind that 2 weeks is most people's memory, and none of these projects are completed in 2 weeks. Might take 6 months, might take a year, right? 6 to 9 months, whatever. We need to have something written down so that way, by the time we get to the end, we can document the gain, and nobody can come back and say, spent all this time, we didn't get anywhere, right? Super frustrating, and it's sort of negative to the team. So those are the 5 components. And keep in mind that the top 2 are just planning. That's it, right? So 40% of this is planning. The rest of this is really integration with a new process, a new way of thinking, right? So why is a digital front door important, right? So it's providing a bridge. This is the component here at the top, provides a bridge to API maturity, no matter what stage you're at. So we can talk about doing this, even if you're just beginning with an API journey, where you're just now thinking about doing some internal integration. We can plan to be a composable architecture, so that way, as we adopt and create new technology, we are creating it in a composable, productized architecture. Now, the primary drivers for doing that are improving the performance of the digital offerings, right? And it's actually for both internal, for our clinicians, and the patients. I think the patients is obvious, but if you go to a lot of these WEDI conferences, lots of them talk about clinician burnout. They're just tired of the systems. And the number one reason burnout is the systems they have to work with. So we can do better there, right? Drive innovation at a faster pace. Oh, I don't know why that happened. So drive innovation at a faster pace. So that's the reason that we can do that, is we can identify that technology and we can reuse it and we can improve it, right? So any of these assets are sort of like pouring your time into these assets makes them better, right? And so by doing that, it'll improve the current deployed environment while also serving the use case of the new one. But at the same time, lowers cost, right? Because I'm using something that's on the shelf. I don't have to go back and put out fires. I don't have to create new technology. I'm reducing my debt buy down, and I'm creating my composable ecosystem. And then lastly, we provide a highly secure environment where the access externally available from multiple internal systems. And I got to say, it's multiple internal systems. It's no longer the idea where I can make a project where two things come together and that's it. Even for those that are on that maybe have a monolithic sort of infrastructure today, where maybe most things are in EHR with Epic, there are additional apps to the side of that we should also be integrating with to really get that experience correct. And in order to do that, we've got to have a highly secure environment to move forward with that. We've got to move past the VPNs. We've got to start thinking about, okay, how do we have a composable ecosystem and offer this externally? The reason why we're doing this is business results, really, right? So improved satisfaction and with patient engagement, employee satisfaction, significant cost savings, right? And we're going to get to that here at the bottom. If you're reading ahead, you'll see some of those. And then also ability to meet customer expectations. And keep in mind, we want to meet the expectations, but not just check a box. We want to turn them into an opportunity for our business so we can get better. Right? And here's some real experience results. I thought I kind of added these sort of at the end, but I think it's important to talk about what we've seen. $15,000 per year per interface. And you're thinking, wow, you know, how could you save $15,000 per year per interface? It seems like you're double counting there, or you're counting it more per year. And that's because we don't have the debt buy down. We don't have these project focused components that we've deployed over time, where we should have created products instead. And then now we don't have to go back and update these things individually. We know who owns it. We have contextual information about documentation. We know what the life cycle looks like, what version we're on. And now we can really get in there and dig in on cost. It's a really good thing to start to think differently. And that's how we've done it. $75 million in digital transformation. This was a very large customer. In their particular case, over 5 years, $75 million is a non-trivial number. So what they had budgeted for and what they expected, not only did they save 75 million, it also shaved years off the digital journey, right? This created a composable marketplace, composable ecosystem, and they're basically to what they wanted to be years sooner. So saving faster to market, and then with that, you have the ability to add more applications, digital experiences. So what's a digital front door look like? And so this is a pretty cool graphic, and it's simplified. Okay, you can put lots more to it. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to talk to us later, I might bring this up and we'll just add your applications over here on the left, and we'll put your challenges of integration here on the right. That you might think of it that way, right? And so one of the challenges here, integrate multiple backend systems. What does that really mean, right? So this authentication brokerage is really a part of that. If I'm going to integrate these backend systems, they all have their limitations, right? So let's do Epic first. Epic's a big piece to this, right? And Epic's got some limitation on authentication capability. So it's got its own gateway. And in order to get to any of the data in Epic, you've got to go through the gateway. That's okay. So the challenge with it is it doesn't have an authentication brokerage that's going to scale out to all these external use cases. So we'll need to put something in place, an additional gateway to manage an authentication component. So having an integrated authentication provider, whether it's your own locally, AD, Active Directory in the cloud, or Okta, something like that. Okta just did have a pretty significant breach, but they're all different options that we can integrate with that, right? The third piece here is rate limiting and quotas. Wow, whitelisting. I know some of you probably haven't really thought about this much, and some of you are like, oh yeah, we're definitely into this. Security teams all over it. This is one of the challenges with external integration. We've got to have the security in place, and we really need to have the security team in charge of it, and not have the developers in charge of it. And as FHIR exists today, a lot of times what we do is we have the developers develop security profiles for each of the assets that we deploy for our FHIR ecosystem. So with the way that we can manage this in a different way is to say, all right, we're going to take this, we're going to submit these rules, and then all these APIs are then run under those rules rather than specific to each one of those APIs individually. So another one of those places where we squash down the cost and having to manage this to develop now and managing that in the future. And then traversing the existing infrastructure. I want to make it clear that I say this might be a red API and you might be thinking Axway, but I just said API gateway. This goes along with my example from earlier. You likely have more than one technology that's in this mix, and that's okay. What we're saying is, let's centralize this experience into one place. We'll traverse existing infrastructure, no rip and replace. And by the way, we'll also be able to manage this message correction and transformation component too, right? Because I'm talking about having lots of backend systems integrated. It's not just one-to-one. If it's one-to-one, it's a lot easier, right? Because you're both going to speak the same language. If you've got many-to-one, now I've got to decide, okay, what language are we settling on? And any of these backend sources that have an older language are going to have a transformation, right? So there's additional components that get put in here aside from security that we have to start thinking about when we go externally, and multi-endpoint. And then these last two are kind of together: standardized and supported access interfaces. So an interface, a lot of times I say it's productized. It's an interface would be a set of APIs to serve that particular use case. And there's lots of them. I simplified them down to 3 here, right? You got a staff interface, a patient interface, and a payer interface. But these are contextual products now where the patient ends up hitting that particular product with the assets that are in place, and the same for the staff interface. And so the usability increases because it forces us to productize it, make documentation, and use technology that's off the shelf. And then the last piece is secure integration externally. And I'll say this again, a lot of these are done with a VPN, especially when we start talking about a payer interface and perhaps even a staff interface. Maybe there's a VPN gateway at the remote sites. We can make this plan a secure plan and then not rely on the VPN to be our security. We'll take that out of it. We'll make the API under the covers the secure component, which is a far more secure deployment model. So what is a real example of this model, but where the rubber meets the road, something we've deployed on multiple different customers? And this one's pretty cool because it's a simple example of something where we can productize it and collapse the use cases down, go faster now and in the future, and the lower costs. So this is an eligibility workflow, but it has a traditional environment and a modern environment, right? So in this traditional environment, we'll have a traditional provider management integration, an EDI at 270 comes out, right? This is a SOAP file, right? So talk about that translation component. And then we're going to listen for that file. It might be over HTTP, it might be over SFTP, which is the most common. And then we're going to do an in-memory translation from SOAP to REST, and then automatically hit the modern API eligibility gateway and get a real-time response from that file and return that back to the endpoint. So now this is really cool. I don't need to have a payer or a eligibility gateway on one side of the house that's file-based, and then another eligibility gateway on the other side of the house that's modern, that's API-driven. I've squashed this down to one service, and I've married the traditional approach to the modern approach. So when we start thinking about this, you can start thinking about where you are in your journey and what applications that you're trying to integrate. And you can start thinking of them as, okay, do I have traditional technology that I'm trying to pull along? Am I trying to get rid of it and adopt new modern technology? These are all conversations that we can have and drive with more value. So with that, I wanted to sort of turn it over to see any questions. Do we have some questions so far?
Hi, Wesley, this is Ruby. Hey, everyone, just remember you can put questions in the meeting chat to everyone, or you can send them to me directly. So Wesley, I did have a couple that came in to me directly. So let's take the first one if you're ready.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So this person says, we're going through a digital transformation ourselves, and we fit squarely in the beginning of stage 3 from your earlier slide. We're struggling with external integration. What's the best way that we could get with Axway to get some additional insight on this? Because it sounds like you guys have dealt with it before.
Yeah, so the best way to move forward with that, we can have an engagement, but I think that a lot of times for that, you've already put a lot of thought into it. In 20 minutes, you could probably give me a really good update of where you're at and where you'd like to go, a little bit of the plan that you have. Axway has a catalyst team, which is kind of an interesting thing. So instead of just having a let you go with it, right, and hope for the best, we have a team that's dedicated for healthcare that does planning, and we call it the Axway Catalyst team. And they are, like I said, they're dedicated to this and can help us build a roadmap so that we're making sure that we're not working on projects, rather we're creating products, and we're working toward a composable ecosystem where we can be more flexible and lower costs for the future.
Great. I feel I was kind of waiting to see if there was any follow-up question, but so far the person hasn't sent a follow-up question. So I'll just move to the next question I have. So this person says they have several different integration vendors, and one of their vendors is saying that integrations need to go through a VPN. I remember you mentioned VPN earlier, Wesley, but so that they're not getting the value of the approach that you propose to move away from VPNs. They said they connect to each partner already. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so from a VPN perspective, it's one of those challenges that it does check the box initially, right? FIPS compliance is also another component to this. So you have a cost associated with the VPN appliances. You can't really easily change them out, right? So if you have contractual change, so something like that, you're driving more and more costs by using that model. And we do this all the time with secure integration through APIs, but we do not use a VPN generally, right? Especially when you start talking about sharing patient data, it's just not scalable anymore. And that day is coming. It's not coming today. It's not coming this year even, but it's definitely something that we can think about. So to sort of wrap that question up, it's really about the cost associated with the VPN, the inflexible solution that it provides you, and then what the future holds with using that model only. We're not going to be able to move the needle on some of our future endeavors, whether it's a mandate or not. And that doesn't really map well with trying to use those mandates to our advantage and use them as an opportunity, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. You know, that's something I feel pretty strongly about and have spoken about at Weedy before. And I wanted to bring that back to one of the things you had on your earlier slides. You were talking about rate limiters and quotas, and we hear of people who are publishing FHIR APIs, and they haven't put any sort of limiter or quota on it. And what that means is you can have a well-intentioned partner who has a poorly formed API that just starts pounding over and over again, retrying on your API. And if you don't have a way to gate that, stop that, and that's the rate limiting and the quota bit of it, then you're not going to really be able to handle the performance impact. And the more we open up with patient and third-party APIs, the more risk we have if we don't have not only the security, but also the gateway itself, monitoring, managing, and so forth. So I thought that was like a really important concept. Sorry, I put my own idea in there, folks. I do have one more question, and I sent a note in the chat, like if anyone else has a question, please post. So I'm going to go ahead and do that question. Wesley, you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this one is hard for me to actually read out, so I'm going to do my best on it, and you might have to kind of interpret it a little bit. So this whole idea of the composable ecosystem, like I know Gartner says it, you mentioned that, but what is it? It just seems like a concept. It seems like an idea. It doesn't seem like it's real. Like how do you go about doing that? Can you like dig a little bit into that? Is it a real thing, or is it just an idea that Gartner's talking about?
Well, I would say it's definitely an idea, but for us, it's also real, right? So on Axway's side, one of the differentiators that we actually have in the space today is to be able to provide you with a tool that can get you to a real composable ecosystem. And that was one of those challenges where you have a platform, right? And that platform would include all of the technology that you already have in place. But now, how do I really get it to where I can have a create a business model around it that's composable, where I can take the technology that I have, easily find it, enable the business to use it and run with that technology, either improve it or find reasons or the need to add additional assets and technology in place. And so I say that sometimes it's an idea for now. And that's why the roadblock here is culture and slow adoption, because the culture has not been to do it this way forever, right? It is going to be a little bit of a change to think this way and make sure that we are doing our business a favor, both short-term and long-term, with these projects that we productize, okay? And the key to this is productization. So that's one of the reasons that I mention the Catalyst team. There was a question earlier about getting engaged. That Catalyst team is really proficient at driving toward what this composable ecosystem would mean for you and providing some KPIs on what you can expect having moved to that model. And it's really helpful. And like I said, I mean, both Gartner and Forrester Wave have really taken this on as sort of an initiative for 23. Hopefully that helps answer the question. If they had a follow-up question, that would.
I hope it does too. I thought that was a good addition to what you said earlier. So thanks for that. So last call on questions, folks. Anyone else have a question they want to add in? Unfortunately, we can't just open up the speaker so you can all talk at the same time, but like it won't take but a minute to type a question in. Okay, I'll wait just a little bit and I'll just add one little thing to take up some airspace here, Wesley. So there's a number of companies out that are actually helping other companies do this composable ecosystem. So I just want to let everyone know that there are actually really successful companies that focus on the low code world, focus on this idea of building packages of capability together and exposing them in a marketplace. So it's an idea that I think is just like super useful for healthcare, but it's hard to wrap your mind around it. So I hope that if anyone does have a question, they'll reach out to me or Wesley. We can, as Wesley said, introduce you to one of our catalysts to give you some additional, talk time and so forth. And once again, would thank all of you for, giving us about 45 minutes of your time on, a very busy week, all coming back from the holidays. So, and thank you, Weedy, for giving us this platform. We appreciate you. And with that, Michael, I'll let you close it down.
No problem. Thank you, Ruby. Thank you, Wesley, for a fantastic presentation. For more presentations, feel free to visit our website, weedy.org, and click on the event calendar. Thank you. Happy New Year, and enjoy the rest of your week.